Welcome back, family. This is Kevin Orris, and continuing the interview series here on IG Live, bringing you the best of the best in terms of masculine feminine dynamics, success, creativity, intimacy, wealth creation, all of it. And today I'm bringing on the brother J Malik. So some of you will know J Malik Taught Me is his handle here on Instagram. He's also got a page on Facebook. And this brother has amazing writing and ideas that go deep on relationships, on wealth, and so many other topics. So I'm excited to get his take on a lot of this stuff and just go into a deep dive around it. So if you're watching this video now or later, please do type in a comment of where you're tuning in from, what's alive for you. And if you're watching this later, type in replay and do share it with friends and family. I'm going to bring Jay on now. All right, there we go. Can you hear me?
What's up, Kevin?
What's good, brother Jay? How are you?
I'm good, man. Let me get this set up here. Let's
Sweet.
dive in.
Let's go. Where are you tuning in from?
I'm in the U.S., St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, right on, man. Well, good morning over there. It's nice and evening time here in Uluwatu in Bali. I haven't spent much time in St. Louis, but I did go through the airport once, so I'd love to check out that town. I hear good things.
Decent city. Decent.
Right on, brother. Well, first off, thank you for joining me. I have been following you for, I don't know, about 6 months now. And, some of your writing, some of your posts are just boom, like they cut through a lot of the noise I see on social media these days. And you have really powerful, beliefs in the way you enunciate them all around relationships, around wealth, and so many different topics that kind of tie together. And I'd love for you to just introduce yourself for the folks that maybe haven't seen your work.
Yeah, J. Malik, speaker, author, pretty much just bring spiritual concepts to a practical way of life, right? I think sometimes we look at spirituality or religion or any of these concepts and they get so outer worldly that we can't apply them to our actual purpose, our actual relationships, our family dynamics, our finances. And so I try to bring these concepts that we talk about a lot in the spiritual community, religious spaces, and make them real world applicable to your day-to-day life. So that's my primary mission in helping people see that bridge between the masculine and feminine in all aspects of life. And it makes things clear when we start getting deeper layers of application. So it's the same concepts, but just more depth to them. So that's my main, purpose and mission here.
I love that. Yeah, cutting away some of the BS and fluff and just going back to the basics, back to first principles. I'm all about that. And, for you, Jay, I'd love to hear even the abridged version of your hero's journey, because I'm assuming you were always, thinking and speaking this way. So, what happened for you? Were you in a corporate mentality? Were you, did you have a setup, a dream, a mission before this, and what changed?
So my journey is kind of interesting. I come from a very spiritual family, um, extremely spiritual family in multiple senses of the word. And so my first kind of mystic experience was at age 9. So, and being very, very conscious at age 9 that I was having a communion with God, like a trembling sensation, like, oh, what is this overpowering energy? And it was actually the day before September 11th, the night
Oh,
before.
wow.
So having that experience at 9 and then having the spiritual backdrop of my family, being introduced to certain esoteric concepts, even within traditional religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, understanding underground and esoteric roots of what we would call mainstream religion today, going into my 20s, really just kind of like trying to figure out how this all makes sense. How does this all work together? And diving into the history of religion. Like you're talking about every continent, every practice you can probably think of. I probably at least skimmed the surface of it, if not dived into it entirely, just like studying. This is like 1920. And so at that time, I was more in a music path. I was very, very deep in like music industry side of things. In 2016, I was the week before I was supposed to perform at South by Southwest. Got into an accident, actually like fractured this half of my face, and then that just kind of led me through a deeper healing process, mentally, spiritually, physically. But it wasn't just the accident; there was more so the culmination, like those death by a thousand cuts that have built up over 20 years, that things that you don't necessarily respond to. And when you get into a dark space, you see all the traumas, not just the one that hits you. You see everything, which is kind of why we go into that downward spiral. So looking at everything and having to, I remember even the feeling like I'm at like negative 100 out of 100. Getting back to zero felt so liberating.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow, if zero can feel this liberating, then everyone should feel some kind of good because we always have an opportunity to grow. So that just kind of led me to just different paths of personal development, helping people in different spaces. And it just kind of weirdly led me on this path, helping business owners and then working with predominantly female entrepreneurs. And so you go through that material mindset, and then you go through the person behind the business and the life behind the business. And you say, oh, well, this money is here, the happiness is here, and we can project on social media like happiness and wealth and success. And then like behind closed doors, it's like, this isn't going right. And I'm like, what is it? And I'm like aware of these concepts. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're not applying the same things you're applying here, there. And it's like, why? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's deeper layers here. And then just observing that within family, community, and just society in general, it's like, oh, wait a minute, all these things go together, like in a deeper way than like that. It's obvious, but then it's like if you go into a little bit more, you're like, wait a minute, these things all connect. And so going through my own journey of like deep personal traumas and getting back to zero and feeling free at zero, not at 100, feeling free at zero, where before zero felt like the worst thing in the world, but getting back to zero, feeling free, and then seeing people who were seemingly had 100 and seeing that there were spaces where our life is not, linear. It's, I can be good here, but I can be very bad here. And just kind of connecting that between your faith system, your purpose, your business, your finances, but your love life and your relationship, your family is like so core of an impact of everything that we do. And bridging that gap is kind of how I got here. So it's a weird journey, but it's where I am today. So
Right on. Thanks for sharing that, man. And I mean, you're absolutely right that those like traumatic, like life-turning experiences will just put everything else in perspective, right? Like all the things you thought you figured out, or like you said, like the little traumas add up and are kind of invisible when we're just going about our day and doing our thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, coming from a spiritual family and then getting interested in all these religions, like, do you believe or have you seen evidence that basically all religions, all mystic arts, all of the practices and philosophies have a central root? Like they all came from the same root?
there's definitely a central theme, but it's just like any kind of diversity. Everything has to mutate, and at some point, when you mutate, things diverge from each other, and you get new creations, new ideas, and that's I think that's healthy, right? I think when you politicize it and just the nature of humanity, like we're going to claim our stake in things, and things can easily get distorted in that process. But I overall look at religion and spirituality as just humans trying to understand things that aren't understandable, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of how we learn and grow and develop. So it's just like we're trying to understand this infinite thing. We're trying to count to infinity. We're never going to do it, but it's just how can we understand it more? How can we get into it deeper? And I think you look at the history, just going back, even pre-modern religions, like just of old times, they're trying to share these principles of life that I will simplify into the word success. Like, how can we have a successful life as humans? What does that look like? That means successful emotionally, successful financially, successful with your family, successful with your purpose, successful with your integrity, your morals. How can we live the most aligned life for us? Because we all are designed with some kind of particular purpose. And there are things that are best practices, right? And we have these handbooks of these guides, these rules that say, hey, if you do this, this will happen. And I think it's been distorted. There's a little bit of political nature in it as well. But if you overlook it from one central thing, it's like, how can we live individual successful lives, but then how can we be successful also as a community? And I think that's the core principle of practically every religion that's been created throughout history.
Yeah, I would agree. Like what I'm hearing as you say that is like natural law or cause and effect, right? Like millions of generations happened before there was shit like electricity, running water,
Yeah,
what we have now, like the high tech civilization. And you just have to imagine humans hunting, gathering, farming, facing nature in its rawest, most violent form. They're
yeah,
just they're just trying to understand how to like you said, be successful in terms of like literal survival and then keeping their culture or their tribe, going. So you can
yeah,
imagine this is where all kinds of ideas came about sacrifice. Like if we sacrifice now, we'll actually have a boon later.
yeah,
Tracking the cosmos. This is where weather, astrology, numerology, and all the superstitions happened because they're trying to find the pattern, right?
yeah. No, that's the cycle of life, even, coming to grips with mortality and what that means, and what does it mean to have a family, and how do you set them up for the best life moving forward? What are the lessons you should give them? And it's like we're even now, right? Like even now, like we think that we're as advanced as we are, but we're not as advanced as we may be in 2,000 years, right? We may be extremely primitive versus a society that comes up in the year 5,000. And we're still just trying to figure out, and I always tell people all the time, like, we're all living today for the first time. None of us have been here. And that's that inner child that can kind of come out when we realize that, hey, we may all be adults, but this is your first time living today. So nobody's an expert at today besides God. And so we're just all at the mercy of what's happening and how can we pass on knowledge or wisdom that we've gained in these unknown times that make knowledge known for the next people who come across and say, these people in 2020 discovered this, and I'm experiencing this. How can we compare and contrast? And I just think we have to accept that there is a ever-growing process into that infinite space to where we're always going to be clueless to what's next. And it's just, we accept that process. We accept that unknown variable. We can live life with a little bit more ease because we're not going to have it all figured out. That's not the process of humanity. Like, it would be a boring human existence to have it all figured out.
Right.
It'd be brutal. It'd be almost torture to have it all figured out. So
Yeah.
accepting that is key.
Yeah, I love that. I love the beginner's mind, right? I love the Zen version of this, which is like the child mind, or, you know, forgetting that you don't have it figured out is the best thing ever. Because when we think we have it figured out, that's when we get mind fucked and we get like, oh shit, we're
Yeah.
trapped, right? And all the people that are miserable that I've ever met, even if they had like financial wealth, they believed that they knew how the world worked. That's the
Mm,
mind fuck. Thinking you know
mm,
how the world works and having strong like opinions about it actually causes anxiety or causes you to be self-conscious.
yeah.
And the people that are the fools, right, are the ones that are just like, they're just kind of like you said, today's the first day. It's day zero. They're actually more free and oddly, if you are trying to believe the other view, more successful. They're actually gonna have more success in love and business and creativity because they're not in their own way.
Yeah. to let that growth happen naturally.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Jay, I'd love to head towards masculine feminine territory. I've been doing this stuff for a couple years and in my coaching just in the background, but now I've really like, all right, I'm just gonna talk about it. Like, let's post about it. Let's get this shit on the table. And
Yeah.
without fail, somebody is freaking out. And so I know I've seen your posts on here on Facebook, and man, the comment sections, get your popcorn ready. They are hilarious. For the people listening, Jay, can you just break down the masculine and feminine for us in the simplest terms so we can put it to rest?
Mm, in the simplest term, that's a complex thing right there. Um,
Or for someone maybe who hasn't like come across this idea, because you know sometimes I take it for granted, or I feel like
right.
everyone has an idea about it, but
So I'm going to ignorantly assume that we understand like the concept of duality of there are two sides to a coin. There's a heads and there's tails.
mm-hmm.
But the coin is still worth whatever the coin is worth. If I got heads, tails, and a quarter, it's still a quarter no matter what. And in the process, and this is why it always kind of goes back to spirituality and to whatever your religious beliefs are, but to understand God's creation and what that means. And this is in several religious texts and all these different things, but man and woman are two sides of God. We are two aspects of God's creation that is humanity. And without understanding ourselves or the other, we can't really understand the collective or the community or the family. And masculine and feminine energy, outside of masculinity and femininity, but just the actual raw energies of masculine energy, feminine energy, which are we just codifying that into just two different forms, but we can say the wave and the particle or the electron and the proton. Like we do it in various aspects of life. But this masculine form is about the physical form, and the feminine is about the formless, the non-material, and bridging those gaps within us, understanding that the masculine in embodiment is here to reflect masculine energy, principles, concepts. And the feminine here, even in a masculine form, the human flesh is here to embody the feminine energy principles. And when we embody those principles, we call those things masculinity or femininity. And those two things working together, we understand ourselves, even in the yin and the yang. You see, it's not half white, half black. It's white with a little black, black with a little white. It's like, and there's this bridge. And we really live in that center line of integration. And we understand and we integrate for the man to actually embody this highest order of masculinity. He has to reflect on his femininity. For a woman to deeply embody her femininity, she has to reflect on her masculinity. And so there is a consideration for the other in embodying ourselves. And I think today we just have a clashing of those two energies, and it's like a war. And when we go to war with each other, when we're meant to be one, we really go to war with ourselves. And we just have a lot of self-destructive behaviors because we're trying to prove the other side of the same coin that we're on wrong. If the quarter is wrong, the quarter is wrong. And when we understand that we're here to be one, like duality, I did a lecture on this a few weeks ago, talking about duality. And really, there's no such thing as duality. Duality is just like the engineering process of breaking down something, right? Like an engine is an engine. If I break it apart, I have parts. Like it's the whole concept of synergy within itself. Like you're your own, like Kevin is Kevin, but Kevin has a nose, but Kevin's nose is not Kevin, but Kevin's nose is a part of Kevin. Kevin has a heart, but Kevin's heart is not Kevin. Kevin has a mind, but Kevin's mind is not Kevin. But all these things make up Kevin. Well, guess what? Man and woman are not humanity within themselves. Man and woman are humanity, but man is not humanity. Woman is not humanity. So I cannot go to war with man or woman and not go to war with humanity. And it's just we have this deeper, just conflict about what is what, who is what, and not realizing it all goes together. And we're all on the same team. We realize that it gets kind of simple. I think if we had aliens rush the planet wanting to kill us all, all the governments will band together really quickly and realize, oh, we're all one Earth. Let's defend Earth. But right now, it's just resolving this conflict, which goes back to resolving conflict within ourselves, with things, understanding spiritual concepts on a deeper level, and making them more practical and making them more um, real world, like this basic for people to understand on a very ground roots level.
I love that. Just like actionable and simple. Like this is what people need. We don't need fancy dogmas and more like ideology. I totally agree with that. And I love what you're saying. I mean, man and woman, right, are perfect. This is what I'm always trying to bring it back to when people are getting all upset. They're perfect complements to each other.
Yeah,
Symbiosis. Like they literally are the perfect complements to solve the problem of life, right? And having family, having village, community, etc. And it's obvious, right? A child would look at his mom and dad or at a man and a woman and just know that. It's just like, oh yeah, like boom. I think it's the danger is, you know, all the categories and all this, the culture war kind of idea. And there seems to be some kind of warfare against masculinity and femininity, both on their own and their pure power and their union. And I'm really curious, like what your read is on that. And also, how does this affect the dating culture? Because I know, I'm sure in your coaching and mentorship, you mentioned working with a lot of women. I'm sure this comes up a lot.
So the war on masculinity is interesting because, again, we have to understand, you know, masculinity and femininity are the expressions of the principles of the energy. So masculinity, you know, structure, order, ritual, routine, all those different concepts. Law is a huge one, right? Femininity, you talk about freedom, creation, expression, all these different concepts. So the first order, and this is going to the spiritual concept of it, to be free and to follow law seem like they are in opposition, right? Like I can't follow law and be free. So there's an aspect of even the human, when it's in that shadow state, it can get very, very distorted very, very easily. But I want to be free. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I want to follow my own way. I want to be sovereign. And it's like, that's a very understandable concept. I think everyone can kind of relate to like wanting that feeling of freedom. The thing is, not everyone understands the concept of leadership or of responsibility or of hierarchy or of control, which are also very much needed. There's a saying that strong times create weak men. And because there's order, there's structure, there's no chaos, there's nothing going wrong. Stop. Nothing going wrong in the day. So there's no need for order or control versus our ancestors who may have went through adverse physical times or famine or just wartime, anything that's very, very destructive to humanity that calls for men to step up and act out of leadership. So we have principles of creating structure, creating law, creating things that protect society when it's in a negative state. But when you want to be free, I don't want to listen to law. And this is kind of, you know, the first, you know, one of the first stories of the Bible. It's, you know, the Adam and Eve story, right? It's like, that was like, hey, try this apple. God's like, hey, this is my only law. It's like a metaphor, but this is my only law. Don't eat the apple. Don't eat from that tree. It's like, sure. I'm like, cool, got it. He's like, hey, take this apple. He's like, oh, this looks good. And it's just, don't tell me what to do, right? And it's against a shadow spirit. And I try to tell people a lot, and this happened, even you can attest, like, you know, even business or even relationship, when you have more structure, you actually have more room for freedom. You have more room to flow because you set the constraints, you set the boundaries. So it's like, hey, here are the boundaries, but have at it in here. Like if I have a painting and I have a canvas on the wall, If I start drawing off outside of the canvas, I am now painting the wall, and that was not intended. So masculinity is about intention. So I have to know where I'm painting on. I have to create some bounds and some rules and regulations. I think we just forgot the principles, right? We start, and that's the exoteric a part of life. Like esoteric is for the few, exoteric is for the many. And when you give people rules without telling them why, or you don't remind them of the like you can I can tell you a rule today. You have a kindergarten. This is the rule. You tell them on day one. You have to tell them again on day 7, and day
Right.
21, and day 44, and day 96. You're gonna have to tell them the rule and why again. You can't just tell them one time and say, "Oh, that's the rule." And so, from a societal standpoint, you have the masculine and have the feminine, and we're going to say, "Hey, you know what? We don't want these rules." Even you look at Western society and America specifically, that's kind of like a major catalyst for this shift in masculine feminine dynamics. You have a culture that's been pretty much designed around freedom, right? We even call ourselves the land of the free, right? So there's a very interesting culture that was created in America where you have people who are coming from Europe who are seeking new opportunities. They're looking for freedom essentially. You have people who are here who are feeling like their freedom is being infringed upon. You have natives and you have Africans. You have all these different cultures that are melting together. And then in that you have so many out of that, like strife and trauma, you have a lot of liberation based movements that are based on, hey, how can I get my freedom back? How can I get my freedom back? How can I get my freedom back? And you look at how feminism really like got its momentum. Like its primary momentum was off a massive energetic wave of like African enslavement. Like the liberation of that's a massive lift of energy that is being fought for and pushed through. So it's like, hey, let's ride this energetic wave. Let's jump on this. We're all about this in this country. We're all about freedom. This makes sense. And every single flow of that, I don't think was considered with like, hey, okay, we have this freedom. They talk about second wave, third wave, fourth wave. You have this postmodern world where we're not even sure what gender is. Like, what is a woman? I don't know. It's like we're getting a very weird time where we can't even have masculine language. Like language is a masculine form. Like without language, we're just feeling our way through things. And so we look at now where we're at in this like postmodern society, or trying to get there at least. If I
Yeah.
can take the meaning from man or take the meaning from woman, I can pretty much destroy this whole masculine feminine thing because you can't even tell what a woman is. And there are women who are in politics who won't define what a woman is because they really fear offending someone, or they fear being canceled, or they fear being criticized, or fear being judged, which comes to their own deeper traumas. But right,
Right.
but there's a fear. There's like almost like a witch hunt. It's like a silent dog whistle of like, nope, not going to define that. I know what you're trying to get me to do. Trying to get me to say a woman is a woman. It's like saying a woman is a woman today is a crime. Like, I can't say that. And so if I can't say what a woman is, then anything a man says about how a man and woman should operate is now obsolete. You can't tell me what a man and woman should do because you can't tell me what a woman is. So now I kind of like control this whole narrative. So now what are you gonna do now? So now you either pushing back on a culture that's looking for an excess of freedom, which again is we're going into like a hyper feminine society because we're losing rules, we're losing law, we're losing regulation, and we're creating law even that is based on removing. It's very interesting. Like to create law to remove order is very
Mm.
strange. And I don't think like historically, when have we done that? Removed order as law. It's like we're trying to put a feminine principle in a masculine form. It's like this doesn't work. Like law is for limitations. It's never been to create like new space for new energy. It's like, this is wrong, this is right, don't do this. Now we're creating things to say, hey, you have to do this, or you have to go oblige by this. It's like, this is interesting. And so I just think we're just in a space politically that reflects our individual and communal spiritual states of how does this even get passed? How do people even begin to agree with these things if they hadn't seen masculine and feminine trauma in the home, right?
Right.
50 years, there's more single parent homes, there's more non-marital births, there are more higher divorce rates. All these things play a part. And even in the families that stood the test of time, no one said they stood the test of time in polarity. They just stood the test of time because they were like, oh, we're not getting divorced, so we're going to keep it going. But what about the traumas that took place? What about the pain that took place? And we're just now getting to a place psychologically to where we're starting to talk about healing in a much more mainstream way, mental health in a much more mainstream way. So we're again, very primitive people. We're very, very primitive. We don't understand a lot of things and a lot of concepts that we would consider maybe natural or normal for a successful person and a successful family to function. They're not mainstream topics. So you ask the average person what masculine energy is, I'm like, what do you mean, like a tough guy? Like a strong guy? So some of these things aren't as like we're in our own little bubble. So we think like, oh, everyone knows about the masculine energy and the polarity, but no one does actually. They don't. Like, because we wouldn't be in the world asking what a woman is. If we understood masculine and feminine polarity, we wouldn't have that discussion in such a mainstream way. We would be able to. There's always been people who didn't necessarily fit into a gender performance. That's not a new concept. What's a new concept is saying, hey, I don't know what a woman is. You can go to the people who can identify as third spirit, or that's a long line of history. But I don't know what a woman is, has never happened. So we're looking at like a cycle. Cycles play out. But for this one to like come up like, this is something new in this age. Like, I'm not sure why this is happening. And, not to be malicious or to, down anyone or shame anyone for how they choose to live their life. That's not what this is about. This is about understanding the collective masculine feminine balance, how we understand each other, how we understand family, and saying, something is out of order, something's out of whack. Men aren't happy, women aren't happy. Something is not going the way we want it to go, and we have to address it at the root, which of our own traumas, so that we can get to the root of the greater collective trauma.
Yeah, bars, man. A lot of topics here that I think folks, it when you hear it, and anyone that's joining us, type of question, comment with feedback, because there's some bombs dropping right now. What you said about the definition and meaning, right? That's the masculine energy, is like, hey, here's the limitations of language, and here's what meaning will be assigned to. This gives profound freedom, right? You hear this mantra like discipline equals freedom. Yep. When you accept limitations, you actually become more free, because like you said, you now have an area of influence, or you have a way to impact the world, right? And create that cycle of cause and effect. And what's scary, I think, about this thing, like, what is a woman? I forget the guy's name, but he did a whole documentary.
Matt Walsh.
Right. Have you seen it? I gotta actually watch it.
I haven't watched it. I gotta see it though, too.
I gotta watch it just for like research. I'm like, I can't believe this is a fucking real thing. I thought it was a parody. But George Orwell, man, and he was around 20s, 30s, 40s, literally in that book, 1984. And he wrote many essays about this too before that. But the way the party in that book, this like tyrannical kind of like one world government party, they control most people, and they literally tell you how they're doing it by rewriting history and redefining words. So if they can make peace mean war, like the Ministry of Peace in 1984, is basically like special forces. It's like the gnarliest war force. So they literally have mind fucked their people into going it's like this idea of inversion, right? Distortion through inversion. And I see this starting to kind of happen with men and women and masculine and feminine. The fact that there are so many people who, we're having a conversation like this. Most people know exactly what we're talking about. When you talk about masculine energy, setting up limits, feminine energy, wanting freedom and expression, people are like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. They can probably relate that to their intimate life. But this woke mob, this postmodern kind of radical thing that's happening, it feels like, it does feel like a witch hunt. It's like anyone who doesn't agree with our nothing matters, there are no limits, there are no meanings, is wrong, and we're going to tell them why. And to me, this is a sign of the times, and a lot of people, who study empires and civilizations, this is a common stage towards the end of an empire, as actually categories begin to break down, and there's kind of this cultural civil war that unfortunately we're starting to see in America. And brothers I talk to in Europe and men's work in Europe, especially in Scandinavia, it's already happening there too.
I looked up the statistics. Like I study these things in depth as far as like family stats, and Europe is getting like burned to the ground culturally. It's actually scary. But it takes conversations, and because this isn't like barbershop talk, right? This is like you have to really be wanting to have this conversation or introduced to it or exposed to it in some kind of way. And what I've learned, most people are open to things where they see the benefit to them. So like, how is it going to benefit my life and my relationship? It's like how people are exposed to these concepts, and they start thinking about like, wait a minute, I see what's happening. I see how we are influenced even as teenagers, right? One of the biggest things I always tell people, like someone asked me the other day, like, do we live in a feminist society? Because I said that in the post. I'm like, we absolutely do. Like the fact that no one here can say they created feminism or they were the first person to advocate for it is proof that we were born into a society that already had feminist doctrine embedded within it, which is not the case for any other time for men and women in history. Like we're living in a very extreme anomaly time period. Like the last 100 years have never existed any other time in the world, ever for any other human being. So we're living in, like, for the men and women today who are taking on this task of trying to build polarity, trying to build family, understanding the conditions you're in. It's like, I look at life as a game, right? If this is the fourth quarter, we're up 20, we're going to play different than we're in the fourth quarter and we're down 1. We're going to play different. We're going to have different energy. We're going to have different speed, different play calls. People are going to get the ball at different places. We're going to have different strategies because the game is on the line. And for most people, they don't know the game's on the line. They don't know it's fourth quarter and we're down. Like, it's not a us versus them. It's a us versus ourselves. It's, hey, look at what we have created as a culture. And again, because we're flowing in from the past, we didn't create the backdrop, but without being aware that it's a backdrop, without being aware of background programming, we can't combat it. And I think it's just like any feminine energy. When there's no masculine energy around, it just kind of goes into its own thing. It just keeps, there's no bounds. This is why men are so important in society. I always use this phrase, but men are the enforcers of law by nature. So men have to be the law creators because men are the enforcers of law. Women cannot enforce law. If someone went to go rob your house, Kevin, you're not going to be like, hey, let me go call all the women I know to get back at these guys.
Right.
You're going to call your brother, your uncle, your dad, your buddies. You're not going to call your woman or you're not going to do that. So it's like because the balance is so off. It's like complete opposite. We're almost in living in upside down land. And there's so much double speak about this dog whistle of freedom and liberation and all these concepts that sound good in principle, right? But this is the job of the masculine, to take things that sound good in principle and make them actually stand the test of integrity. does this actually make sense? Is this going to be a betterment for society? Because it can sound good in a vacuum. Hey, eating ice cream sounds good until you're sick. So sure, some of these things, what can we do to create bounds around this to make it functional, make it fit in with society? Some things can be taken out, some things can be added in, but we can't destroy society to try to rebuild it. Because then the thing is, you're gonna need men when you do that.
That's right.
You destroy this whole thing, you're gonna find out how much you really need men when this thing comes tumbling down. Like, oh, wait a minute, those men we said we hated, or the men that we said didn't need to be masculine, now we're like, where are they? And we kind of see it now a little bit. Like there's this call for like, where are the masculine men? It's like the same men that for the last 60 years people were saying they didn't need. Those men, the same men who have been raised by women who were saying they didn't need those men. How can you raise those sons to be masculine men if subconsciously you're saying I don't want them to exist? We're not even getting into that aspect of it, right? Like the programming is so deep. You know, we know so many things are programmed through the nervous system in the womb of the mother to the child. The energy. I just watched a video somebody posted. I don't know if you've seen this article about the rise of single and lonely men.
Yeah, I saw that.
About psychology today. And it was funny. There was a therapist, actually. She was a woman, and she was going on a rant on TikTok. She actually lost her job. She went on a rant on TikTok about how men need to up their emotional language because they're going to be die lonely. And like she was just, and it was a way more visceral, just like approach. Like you can tell she had a kind of a slight disdain for men that probably came from either previous partners or fatherhood, or whatever the case may be. But she lost her job because people found she had her, credentials out. People found her, reported her to her job, and they let her go. But it's like, seems like her clients were mostly men. Tell me what kind of therapy a woman who has a disdain for men, who is on the internet proclaiming her advocacy for an article about men being single and lonely and how men need to up their game and how women should be hoes, and like she went full on like third, fourth wave feminism in this. I'm like, wow, can we have effective women therapists for men if they're fourth wave feminists? Like, is that actually possible? And even look at the school system. What kind of children are we trying to raise? What kind of adults do we want to have in the future? And to some degree, it's greatly on the part of men, or the blame of men. Like the accountability goes on men to say, hey, if I say we're down by one, I can say, hey, Kevin, take the play off. You'd be like, no, we're down by one. I can't take the play off. And some of that is about men having awareness to say, hey, what kind of game are we playing in? And the institutions of men that have always prepared men for wartime, metaphorically. Like, hey, we have to always be aware of self and the environment around us, and not just our own personal environment, but we have a spiritual obligation as men to be aware of the entire cultural stratosphere, to say what is going on. That is the history, the legacy of great men. They have always been aware of things outside of themselves. Like, yep, they get themselves in order first, but the greatest of men have always been concerned with the greater collective to say, hey, how can we add order and structure here? Not how we can remove it, but how can we add structure here? Yes. And I think we live in a world where that's not necessarily passed down because men are kind of bombarded with sex, pornography, 15, 16 years old. By the time they become of age, like there's how they view the feminine and how they interact with it is not the same as maybe it was, eons of years ago when it was just like primal protective provider kind of role. And it's just, it's a lot of work we got to do. A lot of work.
It's big work, man. And, I don't think a lot of this is from malice. Like, I actually do believe that, good times create weak men create hard times create good men and strong men. And, there are cycles in history, and you got to look back, because I'm like a big student of like, why are these things happening together, right? Look back at the 60s. World War II ends, we killed Hitler, which is like the Antichrist, basically. Like, everybody was like, we got to take out the Nazis. These guys are the baddest dudes. The whole world's like, fuck these guys. But then it happened. And then you have the Cold War and all that. But basically, it's like the world we're living in is the inheritance of that, right? 1950s, everybody's like gee, let's go back to work and let me get my high school sweetheart and have 2 kids. And this kind of like crystallization of the polarity got set up then. And then what
Hmm.
happened, right? People start dropping acid, psychedelics explode, music exploded. So rock and roll and, blues, jazz, all this like music that got people kind of feeling sexy and feeling like, man, fuck this shit. And, I don't know about this stuff. And sexuality, right? Birth control got invented and introduced in the 60s. And then
Yep.
feminism gets roaring, right? So feminism starts going ham. I'm not talking about classical feminism. Like think about, I think 1920s, right? Like women's suffrage movement. The
Hmm.
OG feminists were very simple. They're just like, yo, we just want equality of opportunity. Like women should vote and we should be involved in some of this stuff. They weren't, like you're saying, the third, fourth wave who are so radical and so reject the masculine that not only are there, brothers, fathers, boyfriends, husbands, like suffering around them if they're believing that, but they're suffering maybe the most. This
Mm.
is the fucking sad part about feminism is the
Yeah.
women who go all in on it in its newer forms are the ones most suffering because their DNA is screaming, let me have a masculine force in my life to order, structure, love, and protect me. But their belief system is saying, I don't need no man. And fuck all of these systems. And they're at war with themselves, right? Like fundamentally.
Yeah. It's the rage that comes from like not living in alignment with yourself. And it's I always say it's like an inferiority complex, right? Women who feel like femininity is inferior to masculinity will try to mimic masculinity. And that's
Mm,
just what happens. Like feminism is now, it's like they're trying to mimic what they think a, a powerful man is,
right.
not understanding like the depths of how much like just the average man who just does infrastructural work on society keeps this thing rolling. Like they have this very it's interesting. Like they have this 0.001% of evil men in the world, and they extrapolate that over the entire course of masculinity. And it's very, very interesting how that's done. It's like men control all the wealth. It's like, well, only a few men control like most of the wealth. Like it's not like your average everyday guy is not trying to create a plan to oppress women. He's trying to go to work, earn enough for his family, live a good life. Like that's what the average man wants. But the difference is like the average woman today doesn't may not have the idea that I want to break free from the masculine, but the programming is so heavy with the feminine that it's because it's an idea. I did a live stream on this about the dark feminine and the influence of the feminine. Like when you have an evil man, you kind of know he's evil. Like, oh man, Hitler killed those people. That's bad. What does an evil woman look like?
Good question.
She's influential. She doesn't do anything. She just says, psst, 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 you can be free. You're like, what? I can be free. And you go live that out like, I can be free. And the idea just starts growing. It's like inception. It's like, where did this idea come from of freedom? Where did this free from what? And I always tell people a lot, I tell you a lot of times to people, when you're looking for freedom, you have to admit you're enslaved. And worldview creates your own perception. So if I'm have this worldview that I have to become free, like you are admitting like something in you is creating a prison, but you're not reflecting on it deep enough to say, hey, what is enslaving me actually? Like if I look at my life, is it actually men that's enslaving me, or is it actually my beliefs? Is it actually like, what do you actually want? I actually want this strong, I want a man I can trust and lean into, but you don't, but you say you don't. And your actions, we're visual, we're observant, we're looking at the outer core of a person saying, she seems a little bit aggressive. She seems a little bit, and you have some men who would maybe tend to be more masculine, but because they have a distortion of how they view the feminine and maybe the thing they had in their home where the mom had a little bit more authority or a little bit more power, a little bit more say so, a little bit more expressive, a little bit more vocal, which is masculine energy. She's a little bit more vocal in the home, so he has a subordinate complex when it comes to women. So he's gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna step back because that's what and this is what men do. We're doing it for the woman. Like even feminism, men had to approve of feminism. So even in that, it's like, I'm gonna do this because she wants it. Because she wants to be free, she wants to do this, we should give her that right. But you have these men who are in these everyday average working men who are gonna say, I'm gonna be a little more subordinate because I want to keep her around. And it's just it's a reflection of the collective masculine energy that's becoming a little less covering and just it's underneath. It's only support. And you can't fully provide for the feminine if you're only underneath it. You have to be surrounding it as saying this is the limitations. And we remove the top lid off of masculinity and say, okay, we're only gonna play supportive role. In order to be a man, you gotta support the woman, whatever she does. It's like that's not how this works.
No.
Like you need the masculine to say, hey, I've observed the playing field. We gotta go do this. This is the box that we're gonna play in. You can't just have a line of masculinity because no one's safe. She's not safe. She doesn't feel safe. You don't feel in your authority. You feel like you're compromising yourself. You don't know why you feel like that because, again, this is all energetic. We don't need to understand these words to understand the feeling. We just give words to understand it. So you have a lot of men who don't feel like they're men. They feel like boys. They feel like the son. They feel like they're still pleasing their mothers. And they never quite get a grasp around, hey, what does it mean to stand on my own square? And I did a lesson on the root chakra. And, the root chakra has the square as the foundation to all the other chakras. That is the masculine frame that everything is built off of. And so I'm passionate about men learning, hey, like outside of the context of women, like women aside, learning to govern yourself and learning to observe the rules of the land and say, hey, okay, how can I navigate within that? Because that's the greater masculine structure surrounding me. And historically, men have organized if they want to change that. Like, if I want to change a law, I can get other men together and say, hey, this is the law that's happening. How can we work? This is going to be beneficial, pros and cons. Let's negotiate. Men do business all the time. We kind of figure that out. But what we haven't figured out is, how do you do that with women? How do you negotiate with women? Because it's not a thing that's necessarily ever been done. I'm not sure if that's actually a thing, right? Like the feminine calls in energy. She may request certain things. The man may analyze it, but it shouldn't feel like negotiation. It should feel like synergy. And I think anytime you feel like you have to negotiate, even with yourself, right? Like that means something is being compromised. I shouldn't have to feel like I'm compromising myself. And if we're one, if we're actually one, why are we negotiating? There's no need, because even though these are opposite concepts, they go together. That's what polarity is. It means we can be the opposite without negotiating, and things should be in flow. I don't need a woman to act more masculine to understand what I'm coming from, what I'm saying, or where I'm coming from. I don't need her to become more rigid. I need to understand, hey, this is just in bounds. Just stay in bounds, and you can do whatever you want in bounds. Just don't go out of bounds. And trust me that I have figured out why we shouldn't go out of bounds. I don't want to explain it to you. I don't want to mess up your feminine flow. Just trust me that I said don't go out of bounds for a reason. Now, you may have to explain that sometimes because that's what, intention, hey, this is the reason, X, Y, Z, boom, 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 boom. That's the case. But there has to be some level of trust there as well, like that surrender and submission that plays a part on different levels, right? Like you're in a relationship with someone, it's going to be deeper than just like maybe with government. But even in that, like, okay, I'm gonna have a little bit of trust the government knows something I don't know. Like we should all be aware of like the government knows things we don't know. And they can't tell us everything we don't know because of just risk management. So I'm not going to make people go crazy. I can't tell them everything because if they knew everything, they'd be a little bit more worried than we like to think, and it's going to cause disorder, right? But I got to tell them something. Same thing with ourselves. We tell ourselves things we want to accomplish. We don't always say, this is my deepest fear surrounding this. We just know it's there. We're like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. And with partnership, it's a very difficult thing. Like I don't want to make it seem like partnership is just easy once you're in this polarity state. Like life is hard. That's just part of life. Like enjoy the roller coaster, enjoy the ups and downs of life because that's what makes it fun. That's what gives it vitality. If everything was just flatline, that's death. I need a little bit of variance and experience, but taking that journey with someone and saying, "Hey, I'm going to keep this thing in balance." Taking that burden on the man makes you a man. Say, "I'm going to keep this ship on sail, regardless of what happens, regardless of the storm that we face. I'm going to keep us on path." When a woman says, "I'm going to trust you no matter what, this ship can be going under. I'm going to trust you," like that is deep commitment and devotion to each other. I'm going to keep it on line, and I'm going to trust you to keep it in line, and I'm going to do what I need to do to support you while you're doing that. We don't really have that today. We have the ship going under. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. I told you to fill up the gas. I told you to get the gas. It's like, what are we doing? Like the ship's going down. Like people work together. We need to work together. The ship is going down. And it's like, we're going to die blaming each other about the ship going down. We're going to drown. We're going to drown in negativity. Because the thing is, we're still going to be together. That's the crazy part about all this. No matter what, no matter how bad polarity gets, we're still going to mate, which means it only becomes worse for the children. And they get the trauma, and they have to process it. And family is essentially about how can we create the best environment for the children.
Right.
So it's selfish because we've all had childhood trauma. You know what it's like for this not to be perfect, this not to be perfect, this not to go the right way. Why would you do that again to the next generation? So we have a lot of people who are unhealed from that already, but then also are just still have that energy and disdain, and they place it onto the other, which is usually a parent. Like it's a partner, but I'm looking at you and I'm seeing my mom. I'm seeing my dad. It's
This is the traumatic like alchemy that we have to do. And I see our generation, or basically if you were born in this post-war period, the weight we're carrying is stopping this transmission of trauma. Because one generation of children that are raised in the polarized dynamic where masculine and feminine are in devotion and harmony and leadership together, that generation, they just get a huge head start because they don't have to spend the first 20, 30 years untangling all these knots. They just get to just go.
Yeah.
And that's what I really see as the turning point, is the closer we get to that. And I don't think it's like going to happen overnight, obviously, but if more men and women take dating and courtship and having a family that seriously, and I know a lot of these people, I mean, we're obviously in our bubble, like you said earlier, but more people are waking up to that. I mean, that's going to flip the script, and we just might have to, there's this idea, there's like multiple timelines, right? There's all these movies in Hollywood now about the multiverse. I really see, at least two timelines. There's one timeline where, take the woke mob and all the crazy ass postmodern shit and just run with it. You're going to turn into robots, basically. You're going to turn into fucking robots, or you're going to become androgynous like aliens, like asexual. And that's cool. Hey, like have fun. Go plug into the AI and we'll see you later, man. The rest of us are going to go full polarity and create that king queen ship and like get shit together, right? Recreate some order. And those people are going to thrive, man. Whether you look at entrepreneurs, you look at creative artists, you look at music and where that's going, you look at communities and like alternative lifestyles and where people are going to be living. A lot of people are moving right now around the planet because shit is changing so fast. And this kind of stuff gets me fired up, man. I want to be mindful of time. We're at the hour mark. Jay, do you have like some closing kind of tie this off with a bow?
I just want to say that, this is one aspect of life that's super, super important, like family, masculine, feminine polarity. And the biggest thing, right? This is the big trauma hurdle. But once we can get over this hurdle, I think it's easier to understand how masculine and feminine energy impact other aspects of life when it comes to, like you said, even just where you live, where you choose to live, finances, purpose, work. I think there's a huge, massive amounts of trauma over labor. and how labor should look, and resistance to labor. There's so many different aspects of life that I think we have trauma around. But healing this one is such a massive energy like blockage right now. This one opens up, we will be able to see the other aspects of life a lot more clear, and everyone can just do simple work of analyzing your parents' relationship. You just analyze your parents' relationship and then analyze their parents' relationship. You will have more insights than you can read in a book. It's just self-reflection because it's also in your DNA. Like you feel it when you look, when you observe it on purpose, you say, wait a minute, wow, wait a minute, I can feel that in me flowing somewhere. That's where that came from. And then being conscious of it, when you're in a new state of consciousness, you can solve new problems. And that's become more aware of how you feel about everything and where there's duality, where there's oneness in your life. And you can bring oneness in the home, you can bring oneness into your work or your purpose or your career or your business. You can bring oneness into your finances, you can bring oneness into your community. And that's all it's really about. It may not be a utopia, it may not be perfect, but it can be one, and we can understand how to resolve problems, which is really our second maybe thing that we should do on the planet, right? We evolve and learn, we problem solve, and we make decisions, and we negotiate with others based on those things. And becoming one body as a human collective is like the main goal, right? The body may get sick sometimes, but we know how to heal it. And we're just in a sick place right now as far as, hey, the foot's broken and we got to go send antibodies to the foot so we can heal properly. And I think we'll get there. I think it could be, to your point, on different timelines. Something can go wrong, something can go right. But I just think we have to keep moving forward into that unknown space, and we'll take what we get when we get there. So
That's it, man. That's it. Well, bro, so grateful for you coming on and speaking with me. For everyone freaking out in the comments, I'm gonna post this so you can come back and watch it. And do share this with your friends. Tag a beloved that needs to see this. And if you're tuning up from my page, go follow this man right now at J Malik taught me. And yeah, man, so grateful for this. We might have to do a round two because there's like 20 other
yeah,
topics
man, for
to
sure.
ask you about. So yeah, brother, have an amazing day over there.
No, man, thanks for having me.
Cheers.